The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 4399. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File 4399, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to human services, the second engrossment.
Representative Fisher, before you explain your bill, do you want to put the House language into your bill?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'd like to move the House language to be our base bill.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Fisher moves to amend Senate File number 4399, the second engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded DEA 4392.
Representative Fisher to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is just to get the bill into the language that we've worked so hard on in a bipartisan way here in the House so that we can deal with some really great language. Thank you.
That goes with that.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment. Members, we'll be voting on the amendment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. And the motion is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Fisher moves to amend Senate File 4399, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A5.
To the author of the amendment, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A5 amendment reflects some continued work by the Department of Human Services and others to address adjusting designated coordinating experiences, requirements, and some TA from the department. They've been working with the providers on this. This is the current language that they've come up with. It will still require a little bit more work.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, signify by saying nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Backer moves to amend Senate File number 4399, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A1.
To the member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Backer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That was Representative Baker, not Backer, for the record.
Representative
Thank you.
Baker.
No, you were good. That's all good. Have to give our chief clerk a little gruff on that one sometime. Thank you. It's never happened before. Thank you. So, members, I present to you the A1 amendment to House File 4399. This was, again, a lot of work with our folks in the recovery community that really are finding pathways to keep our sober homes safer. The association that we were working a lot with is called MASH, the Minnesota Association of Sober Homes. It is a kind of a unofficial group out there that is a membership base. They work with a lot of sober homes out there, and there's a lot of differences in sober homes in Minnesota. What this amendment does do, members, is allow sober homes a little bit more time to allow medically assisted therapies to come into those homes, because it's not right for everybody to have that in that environment of this really delicate area of transitioning from a treatment center, for example, into a sober home. I want to thank Representative Frederick for really working with this. This was his bill initially. I signed on to the bill early on. We really did run into some heartburn with some of our sober home owners and things, and so we did a lot of conversations with this. So thank you, Representative Frederick, for your work on this, for allowing me to kind of champion this through. So this amendment, I hope, will be taken as a friendly to allow a little bit more time for the sober homes to transition to allowing things like Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol to be used in homes that are currently really trying to use the abstinent rule in their home. In 2 years, however, we're going to allow sober homes a little bit more time to let other types of medicines that are appropriately prescribed to folks in recovery, like Adderall, other items like that, that have been misused in folks in this community. So again, it's a good amendment. I think it's finding peace in the valley for our hopes and our dreams for people that are in this transition period with sober homes. I want to thank, again, the authors for this, and hope we can get a green vote on this one from everybody. So just a voice vote, Madam Speaker, but appreciate the support. Thank you.
Discussion to the Baker Amendment. Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank Representative Baker for bringing this amendment forward. This is a good amendment. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes for this. This is an example of a bipartisan effort working with stakeholders across Minnesota of what we can do better for people in recovery. What we know from a national level is that medication assistance in people's recovery dramatically benefits their chances of success. And the second piece of this is it addresses medication for what's called co-occurring disorders. So often people who are in substance use disorder, they might or in recovery, might have ADD or ADHD or something else, right? A co-occurring disorder. And so what this amendment does is it says we should allow people who are in recovery have medication for those other conditions because we don't want to put people in a position where they have to choose housing or medication. So this is a good amendment, and I encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying yea. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The motion prevails, and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend Senate File Number 4399, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A3.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This amendment is actually bill language that I have authored for many years now. This is not new language. However, I'm bringing it forward again, and as an amendment, I have yet to get a hearing on this language. But what it does is it provides some oversight to our homelessness programs in a very similar way that we have oversight over our workforce programs. We decided many years ago that it was important to have data on what our workforce programs are doing. And what that means is we want to know when we are giving out grant money and direct appropriations, we want to know what populations are those monies serving. What specific supports are they offering, et cetera. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is simple accountability, right? Like, these are state dollars. We should know where state dollars are going. But more importantly, and the reason that I think this is really important, is that we learned several years ago when we had a division specifically on homelessness. We really learned in that division, and I suspect that my colleagues who served on that committee with me will tell you that what we learned is that we don't know much. We know very little. And we as a legislature need to have a better understanding of where this funding is going so that we know what programs are effective. Because we should want to solve problems here. So what this does, and again, this is modeled after the workforce language, but what this would require is some data reporting on the total number of clients served, the cost of the program, an analysis of the change in the number of people experiencing homelessness. So really, we're talking about the effectiveness of what you're doing, right? An analysis on the change in housing opportunities and supportive services, change in employability, self-sufficiency, and other social outcomes for persons experiencing homelessness. Again, is what we are doing making a difference for folks? A change in the use of emergency health care, shelter, child protection, corrections, and similar services. Again, are we less reliant on these other programs? The cost of the program per client, the administrative cost of the program, et cetera. These are really basic data points that we should be able to use as a legislature when we are determining where our dollars are going, and for DHS and housing, when they are determining where grant money is going. We should make informed decisions, and right now we really don't have the ability to do that. Right now, someone comes to us and says, hey, this is really great. I'm sure it helps, but we don't know. And what we need to know is, are there two programs serving the same population with the same goal? We need to know, is one of those programs wildly effective and one has kind of fallen flat? Because I would advocate that we shouldn't necessarily just take funding away from the one that's falling flat, but let's amplify the one that is showing success. But we can't do that if we don't know what programs are successful and what aren't. And right now, we don't know. So I hope, and I've had good conversations with Representative Keeler about this. I appreciate that. But I hope that we will just add this small layer of accountability so that we have data that we need to make better decisions. Because right now, we are flooding these systems with a lot of money. In fact, I mean, last year, between specific homelessness funding and housing, we put over $2 billion into those programs. But there is no requirement for us to understand if those programs are working or not. And we need to care about that. And frankly, I would just note, particularly at this time, you know, it's been in the news. I of course, my ears prick up when I see these things. But in California, they have $24 billion of money they can't track down that is unaccounted for in housing and homelessness. We gotta know where the money is going. And most importantly, we have to know what programs are effective and what programs are not effective, so we can amplify the ones that are actually helping people. I would ask for a yes vote and a roll call on the amendment, Madam Chair.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative New Brindley, thank you for bringing the bill forward, or the amendment forward. I would have to ask for a no vote because there's a lot of work that needs to be taken a look at in here because of the variety that we have in the populations. While it seems real easy to say we'd like to have oversight, the oversight is happening right now. The department goes through all their grants and they go into each program and they do audits and they take a look at what's being spent. So on a financial side of things, I feel that the Department of Human Services does a very good job of yearly going in and reviewing what is happening. I think the big thing is trying to get results out there, and there's so much that can impact the results out there in what's being reported from year to year. And so I'll give you an idea. There are many different barriers out there. So first of all, are you dealing with a youth population or an adult population? Because that makes a big difference is what the challenges are people are dealing with. Now you start saying, is the population just have addiction services issues? Do they have justice criminal system interactions, mental health? Are there health conditions in there? Are there extra supportive services that they need? How about the need of supportive services for youth? Looks much different than they do for adults. Things that influence outcomes very greatly for different organizations out there is sometime, example, in one area, in one youth area, you can have one youth organization that was able to get one extra large grant for one-time dollars one year, and if you compare them to the other organizations, they're going to look wildly successful because all of a sudden they got a bunch of one-time dollars. So they're going to look great one year, and then they may look terrible the next year. In the meantime, everyone else looks bad. There are so many things that can influence outcomes out there, and some of these get very micro in appearance. Example, I've seen instances where a new apartment opens up very close to one of the shelters. providing deeply affordable rental housing. And that shelter saw just great success that first year. And the following year, it slowed down. Is it because of anything they did? No, it was beyond their control. There's so many things outside of the control of the organizations that can influence the success. These are the type of things where the Department of Human Services is able to spend, they've got the staff that has been doing this for years, who's done an incredible job of making sure that they're directing the dollars not only to the organizations that are established, but working very well with new organizations coming in. And I feel like the way that we've got the bill written here would make it much more complex, added additional requirements out there that may have the unintended consequences of handicapping organizations going forward. So I would ask for a no vote.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative New Brindley, thank you for bringing a really common sense amendment to the House floor. I'm surprised and shocked. I've always avoided Health and Human Services, but it's the largest part of our budget statewide. And I can't believe that we're not already doing this sort of data keeping. This is what we should need as lawmakers to inform our decisions. And I think there may be variables, as Representative Fisher said, but I think that we start with getting the data first. If there's a nonprofit or something that's having a bad year, then let's take that into consideration and find out the whys and the what-fors. But folks, this should be a unanimous vote. This is such common sense governance. It should be done in every department. Whenever any agency that is out there that we oversee, they should be having to keep this sort of data and report it to the legislature so that we can make decisions. The taxpayers of Minnesota would probably be shocked if they knew that this wasn't already law. But yet maybe again they wouldn't, given Feeding Our Future and some other, the daycare issues and stuff that have happened here in the past. But government needs to be accountable. And we're here to make sure that that happens. That's one of our roles, is to oversee a really good use of taxpayer dollars. And we can't know if something is being effective or not if there's no data to be kept on it. So please vote green on the New Brindley amendment.
The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a great amendment for us to adopt, and for the Minnesotans listening at home, it's just an excellent opportunity for us to bring about some transparency to Minnesota state government. And the author of the bill, Representative Fisher, a moment ago, talked about how a lot of these data points already exist, which is great, but what I can tell you is they're not easily accessible to Minnesotans, and they're not easily accessible to legislators. As a member of the minority party, there's absolutely multiple different instances over the last 2 years where the state agencies of this state have failed to provide the data and information that's key to making decisions. It's our role in the legislative branch to ensure the proper uses of our taxpayer dollars and to establish the budgets for our state. And when we're thinking about human services and when we're thinking about the homelessness programs that are established across the entire state, and the fact that this sort of information is already being collected, it's very simple for us as a legislative branch to simply request and require a report to be established and brought to us so that we can make decisions about exactly how much money should be spent in these areas in the future. So I'm glad, Representative Fisher, that DHS does have a lot of this data, but submitting it to the legislature is not an arduous path. This is common sense. This is about protecting the taxpayers. This is about ensuring that as we look forward in Minnesota, that we all as Minnesotans and as legislators, that we understand that we have no ability to continue down the irresponsible and unaffordable path that has gotten us a 36.5% increase in state spending in one biennium. I don't think there's anyone in this room who thinks that we can increase spending by another 36.5% next biennium. But unless we have reporting requirements like this, unless they're delivered to the legislative bodies, we don't know. We don't know what kind of waste is happening within systems of government and programs just like this. So to you, Representative Fisher, and to everybody in the chamber, like, we have an opportunity. If this data already exists, then it should be in our hands as policymakers. Vote green on this amendment.
To the member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just to be very brief, this bill really talks about how we evaluate how effective our programs are. Those of you that are farmers, and I used to be a farmer, there would be no reason for me to continue planting the same corn if I didn't know it was going to be more effective. We wouldn't be putting on fertilizers unless we knew it was going to be effective. It's just a waste of money. And here as government, we need to provide the same strength of understanding of what these programs are and whether or not they're effective. So it makes absolute sense that we would want to make sure that whatever money we're spending is going to be effective. We owe that to our constituents, to the people that are paying the taxes that are going on to these programs. So please consider this vote, and please vote yes on this amendment.
Further discussion. To the author of the amendment, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm a little disappointed to hear the Democrats suggest that we don't need this information, that we don't need this data, and that we don't need this accountability. As Representative Scott said, the government does need to be accountable, and it also needs to be effective. And right now, we are guaranteeing neither of those things. We are putting literally billions of dollars into these programs, billions, with no promise of effectiveness or accountability, neither one. And what we're being told is that, don't worry, DHS does audits. Well, I'm sorry, I don't really trust DHS in their audits. I'm old enough to remember that DHS has gotten in a lot of hot water, and guess what? None of it was discovered by internal audits. None of it was discovered by the audits performed by DHS. It was discovered by whistleblowers, and it was discovered by the press. So I'm sorry that I don't trust DHS to do the job. They don't do it. We know they don't do it. And yet we're going to continue to put billions of dollars into programs with no accountability, none. They have no accountability to the state of Minnesota. The only person with oversight over them, the only organization with oversight is DHS. And those audits have failed us over and over and over. Whatever this magical auditing system is within DHS, it's a failure. So not only is there no accountability, we have no idea what programs are effective. And it's true. It's true. It matters if a program is serving youth versus adults. It matters if they are providing housing or wraparound supports. These are all different things, which is exactly why this language requires information on all of it, so that we can compare apples to apples. So we can say, here is a program serving youth doing these things. Here is another program serving youth doing these things. Which one is working? Or frankly, if none of them are working, why? What do we need to do differently? We should stop amplifying things that are not working for the people of Minnesota, because in the process, all we are doing is making life more difficult and more expensive for every single Minnesotan. Without any accountability, without any guarantee that these programs are effective for the people we're trying to help. This legislation, this amendment is a no-brainer. I've been carrying this for 6 years. If you have problems with the specifics of this language, then give it a dang hearing and let's have a conversation. Let's dig in and make it right. I've been carrying this for 6 years. And in those 6 years, we have put billions of dollars into these programs, and there is still no accountability. And there is still no access to data telling us what is effective and what is not effective. So I sure hope you will use your common sense today instead of your dictates from on high and vote yes on this amendment. Madam Speaker, just to clarify, I did ask for a roll call, didn't I?
Yes, Representative Brindley, you did ask for a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment.
Will the chief clerk call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Keeler.
Keeler votes no.
Keeler votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Keel moves to amend Senate File Number 4399, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A2.
The member from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This A2 amendment would remove delete all of Article 3 effectively. It is a 14C employment program for people with disabilities. Now, when we think about disabilities or disabled, we shouldn't think about people that are autistic necessarily. My own nephew works very well in a facility that he's learned how to paint cars. He's learned how to put, he likes metal. His desire is to be creative with welding. But he is fine. His boss even came to him one day and said, hey, Andrew, would you run this program for me? And Andrew's a quiet young man. He does not talk much at all, which is great. That's fine. Actually, the boss thought, you'll work. You won't be talking, which is true. Funny thing, though, about Andrew is one day he carried a bag with him. For days he carried it, and I finally said to Andrew, I said, hey, Andrew, will you open up that bag and show me what's in it? Nosy aunt, of course. He pulls out a bagpipe. Now, this is a young man who is 18, never taken music lessons, never done any of that stuff. Well, Andrew, you should play it. Oh, I don't think so, Aunt Deb. It's really loud. Oh, Grandma's hard of hearing, she'll hear it this way. So he did, and he was right. It was very loud. But by golly, he could play a song just by ear. He was quite talented. But that's not the disabilities we're talking about here. We're talking about people that cannot work a full day, or they work part-time, or they're not independent enough to go to work. I'm full of family stories today. Oh, Joe's gone. He just loves my family stories. I have an aunt that was disabled, and back then we would send people to Cambridge or Fergus Falls because the family didn't know how to handle their epilepsy. And in today's world, we wouldn't even think about sending somebody to a medical facility because we can't control it. Now, granted, she was old enough that there weren't medicines to control her seizures, and they were pretty serious. So eventually she was able to do some work, and but in today's world, she would have had a job. She would have worked at some kind of job and been successful at it too, because we have changed how we do things. Now, eliminating 14C, and members, I really want, especially Chair Fisher, I really want you to think about this. We are removing something that is still being used. I have a few emails. I believe some of you got them also. Please don't remove this, because my elder brother, who is 66, works this job, and it works for him, and it makes him feel good. It also provides socialization for people that are not getting out of the house necessarily all the time, and it also provides them a feeling of self-worth. I can't, during COVID, I'm sure we all got some of these reach outs, but I had a phone call from a young man from Boston, Minnesota. And his caretaker said, he needs to talk to you directly. We had a long conversation about how he missed his work, his job. And it was part of 14C, and he was so sad. And what really bothered me was on the phone, we talked, and all he could say was, please, Mrs. Keel, please fix this. I want to go back to work. He wasn't even worried about the income he got. He just needed to go and do his job. And of course, we know we wanted to protect them, so because of COVID, we didn't let people go to work. And I felt bad because I couldn't fix his problem for him. And just that concern. But I think when we look at the data of the changes in 14C, and there are, we're watching less and less people use it. I believe that my numbers somewhere are in the, we were over 4,000 to 4,800 people that were using 14C in employment option, but we are down to 3,500. And what I want members to think about is, it is aging itself out. So rather than cutting it off in the near future, letting it just happen as people transition, because I think a lot of people are going to find self-worth in other jobs, probably better pay in some of those jobs eventually, because we know that people that are disabled may very well, and I've seen it happen, takes them a little bit longer to learn the job, but eventually they're mastering it. It was really cute the other day when I was in the cities. I went into the Culvers and it was quietly minding my own business, and there was a young lady in there, and I didn't ask her what she was doing, but every time the boss walked by, she was busy sweeping up the floor, and I didn't ask what she got paid. I have no idea. But she was so intent on making sure there was nothing on the floor, and you could see her value. Her self-worth was so important to what she did. And we might not think that's important, but I don't know. I, as a customer, kind of like when it's clean, not all messed up. And she was just friendly as could be, doing her job, being very social. And I think that's what we need to reflect on when we look at the 14C employment option and watching it as people have those opportunities. We have a lot of rural Minnesota, a lot of people that reached out to me and were rural. The jobs are far and few between for them, and we want to be able to help them do what it is they can do. And so I would really like you to reconsider removing this Article 3, eliminating it, because I just really think with some time and shorter, it is going to be a smaller program, and we're going to be able to see the success of people in the programs that we have in Minnesota, which are so important to our disabilities community. And who knows, maybe one of these young people will eventually be painting cars or putting something together that no one would have ever expected they could do. And I marvel every time I see a young person being able to be successful, or even an older one, just that ability to do something. So I would really like I'm asking for you to reconsider this portion and remove the Article 3. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Keel, I appreciate your discussion and your concerns out there. I know we've had some great discussions in my committee on this issue. I will say is, I used to have a lot of concerns about phasing out 14C, very much similar to where yours were. And what really got me to move forward and become more comfortable with where we are is, first of all, is that we've provided a lot of money last year through Chair Nor's committee to invest into providing services out there to make sure that this transfer over will be very successful. Over time, we used to have over 10,000 people in the 14C program, the subminimum wage, and it's dropped down to, as you mentioned, around 3,500. And a lot of that because most of the people that were in that were starting not just aging out. A lot of them were finding out they were going to being paid to positions that were paying full minimum wage. What even really helped me more as I was dealing with this issue, particularly over the last year, is I had a provider in my district who went from being a 14C to going to the full minimum wage. And I was impressed when I went to the program to watch, is they had a wide mix of people there. They had not only piecemeal program going on, but they also had a great day program. And so when people were not able to do the piecemeal anymore, they were able to go over to the day program, so they had this great interaction back and forth. And at the same time, while they were working there, they were paid minimum wage. Now, some people were a little bit more productive than others, but everybody there was working their heart out. And the provider said, they're all working so hard, they should be compensated for the same, because when they got done overall, it averaged out that everybody was able to earn minimum wage. I mean, that's what we would look for, is being able to validate that. I know there are concerns. How will it work in the rural area? We've seen the programs transfer over just as much in the rural area and having these successes as they've had in the urban areas here. I think one of the things that caused a lot of concern for me was alleviated by that as we had these discussions, being able to see it work, and then hearing that those same transitions are happening out in our rural parts of the state, because I know things look much differently in the rural parts than they do in the urban parts, and so that gave me more comfort. Some of the things that caused some concerns for me, though, was the testimony we had the last time we had a hearing on this in our committee, when I had my overall bill, when we had somebody come up and say, I was paid only 7 cents an hour. We have no floor right now in minimum wage in this area. It's the only part of the state that people have no floor on minimum wage. They can be paid as little as 7 cents an hour. And I'm sorry, I just cannot live and look at myself in the mirror knowing that people can be paid that low. Average for the state right now is $4.15 in the 14C program, which means over half the people still on it are making less than $4.15. We can do better than that. I know there are concerns out there. I know we've got support programs out there to address that, to make sure that nobody gets left behind. And I hear those concerns, and I want to make sure that we continue to focus on that going forward. And that's why I'm asking for a red vote today. And I very much appreciate and hearing the stories out there. We've all got the concerns, and I think we've got a plan that gets us where we are, that doesn't leave people behind. So thank you.
Discussion. The member from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would guess some other people want to talk, but first of all, I want to ask for a roll call.
Representative Keel requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There are a number of people on the list. Do you want to wait and do a closing argument?
I will wait.
Okay. The member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was sad to see this included in the omnibus bill today, because one of the great pleasures of being a representative is people invite you everywhere, getting invitations to go places you'd never otherwise go. And one of those places I was invited to was Achieve Services, and they're located just in Southwest Blaine. And they have the 14C program working there, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. Because a lot of people, when they think of going to a center for somebody who has a disability, that, well, especially with all the funding issues, they might be stuck in a corner and just sit and do nothing, or do nothing fulfilling. And our centers do a lot of good work. Funding them is a big obstacle, but what the 14C program allows them a chance to work. And they like to work. You know, it's a normal human experience to draw value from your work. It's a fulfilling experience. You say, oh, there must be some wage that they must be paid, and if we don't do that, there's no value to it. But what I saw when I was there, I saw 8 people working They didn't seem like they were happy. They were not feeling like they were not doing something valuable. They were enjoying their experience and providing a service. And so when we talk about how the numbers are going down, we're going from over 10,000 to 3,500, that's demonstrating the system working. The system works because a lot of these people who are paid at this wage are now transitioning to much higher wage jobs. They might not even be able to transition to those jobs without the work experience that they got through the 14C program. And since it's a system that works, clearly, it's actually very effective, and it provides a benefit to the people doing the work, not just to businesses who contract with them, it seems ridiculous to get rid of it. Because even if, say we get rid of it, you know these 3,500 people are not going to all still be employed. The 3,500 people in this program will not all continue to be employed. Maybe some of them will have the opportunity to go to those full wage jobs, but I guarantee you there will be a significant amount that you're taking something away. You're taking something away for them that provides value to their lives and imparts marketable skills, because we see the system working. So it really doesn't make sense to get rid of it, because these are the last people who we should be making laws to take something away from. And without this amendment, you're going to cut out a significant portion of the businesses that actually want to participate in this program. Because, you know, generally, somebody who has a disability is going to be less productive overall than somebody without a disability, generally speaking. So if a business has the option to pay person A one wage and the same wage to person B, but person A produces more, you're creating an incentive against the people that we want to help. You're changing the incentive from now there's a good reason, a good logical reason for these businesses to do it outside of it being a nice charitable thing to do. You're taking away the incentive, and you're taking away the ability for a significant amount of these people to actually work and develop life skills. So I urge you to accept Representative Keel's amendment. The Senate doesn't have this in their bill, so it also will speed up conference committee just to get this out of the way right now, because I know a number of senators find this program very valuable, because it is valuable and it does work. And I, for one, would never want to take the ability to work away from somebody just because I think something should be better for them that they can't do. So, members, please accept Representative Keel's amendment. It's really the right thing to do, and we should not be taking away jobs from people who want to work.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Edelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would ask members to vote in opposition to this, vote no. So I am on the Human Service Policy Committee and been here at the Capitol. This is my 6th term, my last one. And we see issues come through, hard issues like this one. And Representative Keel, you are one of my favorite members, along with Representative Baker. I know your heart is in a good place. But there's sometimes that we do things out of fear in this place, in this body. We don't want to move forward. Representative Keel, you had mentioned how we've seen the number of the usage of the 14C go down, and that's true. And that if we it will phase itself out. But I think there was a moment over the years that just this last few committee hearings, this man came up and he testified. And here, words are really powerful, right? The people that make their way here. He said, "Is this what I'm worth?" He hadn't planned to speak. He had not planned to speak, but he did. He was compelled, like so many people. And Representative West, also, you are, again, I really like you. I really do. I mean, this is not a partisan issue, guys. This really isn't. You said the system works, but it works for whom? And so I ask us as a state, as a legislature, to not make this a partisan issue. It's not working for many people. And if it's not, if we say the people that are working and they're happy, let's pay them then. Let's pay them so that they're valued. And I will tell you, I have worked on disability rights long before I came here to the legislature. And there has been a lot of things that have happened throughout history. Democrats and Republicans have stood up and said, you know what, we're not gonna do this anymore because it's not who we are, it's not our values. And so I ask you to vote no on this and support the ending of the subminimum wage.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just heard out of fear. My fear is for those that'll miss out on the growth and opportunity, because for years I was on the governing board for ZED, and we worked with special ed across multiple school districts. And the first thing that became apparent is the reason why they have IEPs. The variability in the needs and issues of each individual are dramatic. And we've got a lot of improved technology, adaptive tools, and other things that are helping. But what I saw in those children is they had to take the first steps and gain confidence and succeed and take the next steps and grow and develop. I've seen that in so many individuals that from the start to where they ended up when they left the system, it was huge. And I saw the sparkle in their eyes and the joy in their hearts as they made a success and another success. Now, we've improved things, added options, so that I'm great and happy about the 10K going down to 3.5K. But my experience with what it took with young people that had difficulties and challenges is that if we don't allow the continuation of this program, there are going to be, I think, thousands left out that won't get into something that they can phase into and grow and get success. I would much rather this bill be addressing the floor issues and other issues that might be popping up in the existing to improve that. But to get rid of an entry-level opportunity and decrease the total number that can participate gives me pause, because I have seen what happens when someone that's had a tough life is able to get their first income. They're working. They're successful. That makes them braver and stronger to take the next step. I think by taking out the 14C, we're removing the option to allow them to reach a step and stage where they could have at least multiple choices for jobs. Opportunity is different for individuals. And sometimes you need a little stepping stone, or steps, or however you want to put it. And that first small success opens up the dream and the possibility and the desire to drive and strive through the hardship to make it up. So please take the amendment, and if we need to fix some issues with some programs and that floor, let's do that. But don't take away that entry-level opportunity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This body passed the elimination of 14C employment last year as well. And when that happened, I had a floor amendment to remove the elimination of 14C, but to provide this funding to ensure that we are helping people gain their highest level of employment that they can have. And fortunately, through conference, that's where we ended up. And as has already been discussed, that has worked. Now, it's a little misleading. We're talking about this 10,000 number. Frankly, we had already been trending down on the use of 14C for many years. So really, we moved from 4,000-ish participants to anywhere from 3,200 to 3,500 participants. So the move over the last year has maybe not been quite so drastic, but nonetheless, we've moved in the right direction. And that funding has proven successful, hopefully. Hopefully those people, again, I don't know if the data has actually shown us that yet or not, but hopefully that means that those folks have actually been able to move from 14C employment to a minimum wage employment, a different job. Hopefully that's what has happened. I've heard some things, though, that are frustrating. I've heard that we can do better. The problem is this bill does not offer better. This bill does not offer better. All this bill does is eliminate a choice for individuals and families. And I think that's important, that it's for individuals and families. You know, we heard a lot of folks, and I don't sit on the Human Services Policy Committee, I only serve on finance. So we actually did not hear this bill this year on the finance side, but I've heard lots of testimony on this in the past. And the vast majority of folks from the disability community who come and testify in favor of eliminating 14C are folks who are already employed in at least minimum wage jobs. Because there is a group of people who are profoundly disabled. And it is those folks who could not come and advocate on behalf of themselves. But their families did. And their families said, please do not take this choice away from our loved ones and from our families. No one, no person in the state of Minnesota is required to participate in 14C employment. No one. So right now, today, if there is a family who feels like this is not right for them, they do not have to choose it. They don't have to choose it. But they can. And I want to tell you who this system works for. Because it was said that this system doesn't work for everybody. But let me tell you who this system does work for. Right now, this system works for people who want the dignity of work and are just unable to attain other employment. And I hate to tell you, folks, it's just reality. There is a group of people for whom that will always be the case. There just is. And taking away 14C employment does not take away that reality from those individuals. It does not take away the reality that they live, and yet they deserve the dignity of work too. They deserve this opportunity. And this idea that we can do better, I would love to figure out how to do better. But again, this bill does not offer better. It only takes away. It only takes away choices from families. And sort of ironically, 14C is a federal program. This isn't even state dollars. But instead, our solution is that these folks can just go to day services, they can do other things that take away that option to work, that dignity that gives them. And frankly, at a higher cost to the state, it just doesn't make sense. And this doesn't even account for the fact that these services offer respite for caregivers, for families. That's sort of a theme we see from our Democrat friends, and I know we're not done seeing that today. But taking options away from people does not solve a problem. It just takes away options. That is not a solution. I would love to hear your actual solutions on how to serve these folks. But right now, you have not offered that. And so with the Keel Amendment, with the A2 Amendment, we are at least suggesting that let's stop taking things off the table. Let's let these individuals, let's let these families make their own informed choice, which is what they can do right now. Let's vote yes on the Keel Amendment.
The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is incredibly important to me and to the people who live in my community. I happen to have numerous facilities in my own community where there are families and there are people with disabilities who benefit from having the chance to go to work and have the dignity, the joy, the purpose, and the community that's found at their job. They do great work, and they get to spend time with others. They get to find the joy of being in community with others. And to the comments that have been made so far by my colleagues, Representative Keel and Representative New Brindley, stripping an opportunity, stripping a choice from those people would be one of the most difficult and challenging things that this legislature could do. We need to lean in to providing more opportunities to enhance the quality of life for every Minnesotan who is facing or who is living with a disability. We need to enhance the quality of life rather than stripping away an opportunity for 14C employment, which has been mentioned. It's a federal program. It's a federal program, and this is state intervention into this program that would seek to limit and restrict the opportunities of folks in the disability community. I believe in the dignity of human life, of every human life. And I believe that folks in the disability community should have the opportunity to work. And I'm worried that this policy before us right now is going to result in joblessness, in part because this has already happened in other states. In places where this policy has been adopted, people in the disability community have lost jobs. They have lost opportunity. And when we look out into the future, and as our nation grapples with how we value the dignity of life, when we have that conversation, we have to recognize, and as policymakers, we must recognize that the projections show that opportunities will be stripped away for the people with disabilities if we continue down our current course. Sure, there are additional programs that have been put into play. And yet, will those programs be able to close the gap between what private employers are able to pay for the work that is accomplished and achieved? Or instead, will those jobs cease to exist resulting in people with disabilities across this state instead being left alone in their homes. That's our concern here. We need to champion the dignity of human life. We need to champion the dignity found in a job, the joy, the purpose, and the community that comes from having a job, instead of stripping away the opportunities for people with disability. Please vote green on the A2 amendment.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Curran.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, members, for the discussion. I know this is a tough issue for everyone to consider, but I agree with Representative Edelson that this is not and does not have to be a bipartisan issue. You know, just hearing some of the remarks made already, you know, we heard that a lot of programs are phasing this out, and that it seems like collectively we're in favor of this being phased out. And that's exactly what this provision in the bill does. This gives us a timeline to ensure that we are making our way toward the goal that it seems we all share, that we have folks making minimum wage. And I just want to be clear that the date, you know, included in this provision is 2028. And so there's a bit of this atmosphere right now that this seems like there's an, you know, this is going to be an emergency and places are going to close tomorrow, and that's just simply not the case. What this bill does is give that transition time so that folks do have the time to implement new ideas. And we know that these new ideas are working because we've seen programs transition already, and we've seen them thrive and have great success. And I just have to address a few other things too. You know, I think it's really important that we are listening to the very people with disabilities on this issue. And I know that's not always possible. I'm very aware that it's not always possible. You know, some folks say that visited facilities that they would never otherwise go. Some of us have worked with folks who go to these facilities for decades and haven't just visited once or twice, but this is part of our life. And I just want to make sure when we're thinking about the folks who don't have the ability to come and advocate for themselves because of their own levels of ability, that we are being told, the people doing this work, people with profound disabilities, we're being told they have very low levels of skill and productivity. And in the same breath, we are being told these same individuals are making an informed choice to do this work with full understanding of what's happening. These things cannot exist at the same time. What the reality is, and I know this is a difficult conversation, the reality is there are adults in these individual lives who are making this choice for them. For better, for worse, for neutral, that is the reality. If we want to talk about reality, that is what's happening. And I just have to say, you know, we really need to be listening to the people with disabilities who are able to come and advocate. And we've seen that, and we've heard from people, and we have heard the legislature directly asked, is that all I am worth to you? And I have a very hard time considering this as a charitable program, because what's happening is organizations are receiving funding for this. And that funding is not making it all the way to the paychecks of the people actually doing the work. And who is ultimately benefiting are the vendors getting cheap labor. So my big, you know, this is a struggle to deal with, and I absolutely think there are better ways to approach employment when it comes to disabilities, people with disabilities. But we have to recognize that no person in this room and no person who might be watching and listening would ever entertain the idea of their employer basing their wage on what sort of resources they receive from the state. I cannot imagine anyone saying, yes, employer, look at the resources I receive. You know that I receive everything I need already, so go ahead and pay me 7 cents an hour. And that's what's happening, and that's not okay. And I'm not advocating for losing a program. I'm not advocating for people to sit at home doing nothing. Sitting at home doing nothing is the fear that Representative Edelson was talking about. We have seen programs transition successfully. And what I'm standing here today to say in opposition of this amendment is that there are far more opportunities for folks to be engaged with community and to feel productive and be productive outside of employment. And we see that already with folks who are retired or folks who otherwise choose not to work for whatever reason. It is absolutely a great thing for anyone with the time and ability to engage in their community, to be involved in volunteer work, to contribute to our communities in a variety of ways. And to say that if we don't allow somebody to sit and put widgets together for 7 cents on the hour or $4 an hour or whatever you want to call it, that's below minimum wage, to say that is the only option, I think is, that's really not considering the ability of the organizations that are doing this work. Because I think the folks who are involved in this, I do think at the end of the day, everybody has the best intentions. I don't think that anybody who are working for organizations and doing this work at heart want to be doing the wrong thing. I don't think that's true. I think we do want to be doing the right thing, and that's why I think this should be a bipartisan issue. And I need to emphasize that there is value in doing things that aren't employment. There are a variety of things that people can do. We just have to ask ourselves, when we talk about dignity, I want to make sure, too, that we all have a full understanding in this field of the work that's been done to recognize the dignity of people with disabilities. In 2015, this body passed the Positive Supports Rule. And that was a difficult transition for people at that time, a very difficult transition for families who thought, this is gonna mean my child with disabilities, my adult child with disabilities is gonna face immense risk in the community. And there was fear there. There was real fear, the same fear that we hear today. And the Positive Supports Rule is working, and what it's doing is empowering people with disabilities. Because sometimes, people with the best intentions are holding others back out of fear for what could happen or what might happen. But we need to recognize what will never happen if we don't allow people to engage in the opportunity for work at at least minimum wage. And lastly, I'll just say, this has been a struggle for me personally. Last session, I was uncommitted to this issue, and I've done a lot of research and a lot of conversations. So I know that this is difficult. But I have to believe that this strong community that has held together and has come up with amazing, amazing progress over the last decade or two in this field, I have to believe that we are better than saying there's no other option. We absolutely are better than that. There are other options, and I just have to encourage folks to vote no on this amendment.
The member from Candy, Ohio, Representative Baker.
Members, this is a really an important issue to me as well. I think this part of a generally pretty good bill, Chair Fisher. This is the one that ruins it for me, because we talked about this a lot last year. This is an unemployment bill for a lot of people, and I'm afraid that if you don't seriously look at the other ramifications of just having an end to it, and that's it. There's no other ideas. That's the best you got, is just ending it. That's a cliff. And that's the best you got. I think we all agree that we don't want to see people making 7 cents an hour. But how about offering a floor? Madam Speaker, would Representative Fisher yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Baker.
And to my friend, Representative Fisher, have you thought about a floor?
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Baker, I'm open to hearing any thoughts that people have. I'm not going to rule anything out at this point in time. I know that we need to do better. I don't want to commit one way or the other right now, but I'm not going to say a complete no at this point in time.
Representative Baker.
And to that, we've got to talk about the reality of what's in the future, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years out. The likelihood of a current minimum wage to go up is probably pretty strong, that it's going to go up in the future. Right now, we've got different minimum wages around the state of Minnesota. We've got our Minneapolis minimum wage. That's roughly 50% higher than the state minimum wage, right? So what we don't know today is what's the minimum wage going to look like in 2 years or 4 years when this thing actually comes to a complete halt in 2028, I think is what it is. 2026 is when we can't hire anymore. 28, it's over, done with, no matter what. And if then the minimum wage is, I don't know, statewide, some wage higher than what it is today, my concern is we are going to, we're going to even make it harder for folks to be able to have a employment option, a choice, because the higher the wage goes, the harder it will be to define that. That's where I think we ought to talk about a floor. That's where we ought to talk about something sliding, perhaps, that moves along a bit, but doesn't kill the jobs. It's another off-ramp. But right now, all you have offered is nothing available after this date. It's over and done with. This has been talked about for the last several years, and I have stayed on point because I have served on the board of directors for West Central Industries, who does great work. And I have heard from family members in tears, please do not end this program, because their adult son or daughter can't speak for themselves. And we've heard this in committee. But members, this is sort of, to me, a lazy way of doing it. Just end it. That's like this one size fits all. We don't have the capacity to come up with another option. Let's think about this. Before it got to this point, we should have come up with other options, other ideas. I should have done it today with an amendment. But this is too important because as we see the numbers declining, in the state of Minnesota, if it's in that 3,000-4,000 range now, it might be 1,000 left in another year or two. It might be another 1,000 again. But there will be a point when it's going to end. There might be 500 to 1,000 people that then have nothing. And we are going to be crushed when those folks have nothing, when those families have no way to get respite for those day projects, those day options to be working, and now that's over because they don't qualify any longer. So, members, we can do a lot better. We're not done yet. I wish today, Chair Fisher, you would have accepted the Keel amendment and we would have got to work on something better to offer in conference, because I think that's going to have to happen if something's going to happen, maybe, I don't know. But we can do better, because I think we all really care about these folks. We all do. But just to end it, because you can say you ended it because of some sort of disrespect, this is very disrespectful that we never even give them any other option at all but to just end it. The cliff is coming. They're not going to be happy. This is not how we should write bills. Members, we can do better. Please support the Keel Amendment. Thank you.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, members, and Madam Speaker. You know, I've heard some interesting language about this provision, and quite honestly, the comment about vendors getting cheap labor was cheap in itself. I was actually taken aback by that rather rude comment and ill-informed comment. To the representative that made that comment, it's vendors getting cheap labor, I would implore you and encourage you to actually visit a center where these individuals are hired to work. I've been to centers before, and you should see the joy on the employees' faces when they are working. The happiest employees you will ever see. They are excited to go to work each and every day. And sometimes they don't want to leave work because they're there with their friends, they're having a great time, and that's what they want to do. I also can't stress informed consent enough. You are not, it's not just, let's hire some cheap labor. The individuals who are hired to work there want to be there. The family knows the amount of pay that their child is getting. There's no surprises. But by removing the 14C, what you're doing, as we've already heard, you are removing choice. I wonder if any of you have read the emails that have been sent to us. There's a gentleman in Representative Paul Anderson's district who writes to us frequently on this. By eliminating 14C, we will be taking away their right to choose where they work and reducing the community integration by forcing thousands of them to merely sit at home and be more isolated than they have been in the past. Now, the individuals that we have heard over the last few years advocating for the elimination of 14C are able-bodied individuals. They are there advocating for the removal, but those who cannot advocate for themselves, as Representative New has said, their parents are advocating for them to keep this program in place. But for some reason, this body takes the words and takes the testimony of those that are able-bodied, high-functioning individuals that are making a wage that is definitely greater than those who cannot advocate for themselves. There was a Substack, I think we were all emailed as well, a subminimum wage or no wage at all by John Phelan of John Substack. And I guess it was reported in the Star Tribune too on this topic. But yeah, in the Star Tribune, one correspondent wrote to the Star Tribune, I have a nephew with some Angelman syndrome, a serious genetic disability. Nonverbal, requires 24/7 care. His work provided him social interactions with others of varying skills. I don't know the number of people who will forever lose such opportunities to get out of the house and to work in a safe and structured environment. For my nephew and his parents, it was never about the money. He made only $70 one year. His parents put the money in his fun money pouch. He knew it was money he had earned. His parents helped him spend it on activities. The highly supervised work structure helped him be more responsive when he was with his personal care attendant. The program saved his parents thousands of dollars in paid professional care. Between COVID and the closing of the few remaining work programs, my nephew now has few opportunities to get out of the house and be in society. The structured workshops had all kinds of staff who labored diligently to provide individuals with serious disabilities some of the joys and rewards of work. That was during the COVID years, and now they're back in the facilities able to work. But members, this is a very important program that we have here, and I really implore you to rethink what you're doing. And if you want equity, this is equity. This is about providing jobs to those who are unable to go into the workforce like you and I and be able to hold a job without the stress, without breaking down, without panicking, without panic attacks, and be able to work in a facility along with other individuals that they are their friends, that's who they like to go with, they want to go to work. Let's not take that away from them. Thank you.
The member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I heard twice on this floor something that really made me sad, and that was comments from testifier that says, "Is this all I'm worth?" And that saddened me for probably a different reason than what most of you think. What saddens me about it is because when we leave that alone without talking about it, what we are doing is reinforcing the belief that all of us are valued based upon how much we make, not about who we are. The reality is that there's many people in here that make more than I do, a lot of people that make less than I do, but yet I don't equate myself as better or worse or have more value than anybody else in this room. And I think that's true of all of us. Because we're not defined by how much money we make. At least I hope not. Shame on us if that's how we do it. Instead, we need to understand that the wage that we get is for the job we do, not because of who we are. I'm not my job. I do the job because I either enjoy it or whatever. It wasn't too long ago in which I visited with people that were in a handicapped home, and one lady was in a wheelchair, had very difficulty moving. She was able to do a piecemeal work of like 4 little things in a course of a day, which would have taken me about 10 minutes to do the entire 4 things. But the pride that she had in being able to do something that was productive and gave her great pride was just immeasurable. In fact, she enjoyed meeting with people more so than she did the job. It gave her an opportunity to do so. I don't know those of you that have ever done analysis between the studies about what keeps people in a job. Guess what isn't number 1? Wage. That's 3 or 4 or 5 down on the list. The work climate, the benefits, close to home, all sorts of other things are much higher than that on wage. And yet here we are trying to define an individual, and we're reinforcing the idea that an individual's worth is based upon the wage they're making. When minimum wage is mandated on a job or a work project that is worth less than what that minimum wage is, you know what happens to that job? Anybody guess? It disappears, or it goes to China or Mexico or someplace else. It doesn't stay here. The reality is that even if we only lose 1 job for a person that might enjoy it, I think it's too high. This particular amendment would say, hey, we understand that there's some issues out there and that there are some people that should be progressed further on their wage scale, et cetera. But for a great deal, many of these, this program works. Let's keep it in until we get something that's better. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater and then decide, okay, now what do we do? It's important for us to maintain our, I guess, representing the people that can't speak for themselves and try to help us understand this is value to them. They have value to us, not based upon what they get paid, but because they're part of our society and they're part of us. What you're doing with creating this problem in which they're going to lose their jobs is tell, well, we're sorry, but you didn't cut the grade. I mean, that's not right. Let's support this amendment. Let's vote all green on it, and let's move forward with a much better bill. Thank you.
The member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Madam Speaker, it's certainly certain that we all care about this issue for many reasons. But I just want to be very brief. None of us have a crystal ball, so we really don't know exactly what's going to happen, do we, Representative Fisher? But we do know what 3 states have done just recently in reducing and eliminating this very provision that you're eliminating in your bill. And we can gauge that this could happen to Minnesota as well. Again, we're not gods. We don't have a crystal ball. But the 3 states that Representative Schultz was kind of mentioned about, Vermont, Maine, and Washington, did this very thing. And many, many of those in the disabled community lost their jobs. So that's the fact. The testifier in the Labor and Industry Committee, who is an advocate for the advocacy group that is working on this particular issue, did recognize that those 3 states, when I mentioned in committee, all lost, the disabled community lost jobs. Many, many thousands of them lost their jobs. And she was aware of that. And she should be, because she's pushing this. She's working hard to it. It's very important to her. I don't recall her last name. I remember the first name because I saw her at the Capitol then that very day, and I came over. I was a little late for session. I missed the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, which I hate to miss, but it was an important conversation that I had with this very lady who testified in committee, who was working on this very important issue. And she said, I'm very aware that the 3 states have done this with no plan. And because they had no plan to replace it, many lost their jobs. Representative Baker mentioned in his talk that because we don't have a plan, Representative Fisher, and it's just going to be completely eliminated, indeed, you are going to lose jobs for the disabled community. It happened in 3 other states, and it'll happen to us. So, Representative Fisher, I hope you're listening, because I know you care very about this issue very much. You said so several times tonight already. But if you don't have a plan, we will fall victim to the states that have already done this and lost many jobs to the disabled community. So I hope, Representative Fisher, that you recognize this. I believe you are. And a plan must be taken place and not just completely eliminated it, because we will fall victim to the other states. Madam Speaker.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to, while we were sitting here in the debate, I got a text message that I think is worth reading. It says, Ann, my 20-year-old grandson has autism. He is nonverbal. He can't speak. The value of money is not important to him. He has so many ailments, as many autistic people do. He has seizures. Some nights they get no sleep. His seizures are so bad. He has serious intestinal issues. He misses his program often due to illness, but is so joyful when he can go. We need programs like this for him. They need various levels of programs. And here's what I want you to hear, folks. I'm happy my John does not live in Minnesota. What a sad statement. What a sad statement that this grandmother is saying, because of the choices we are making for our disabled community, I am glad my disabled son does not live here in Minnesota. Think about that, folks. Again, I've heard lots of talk about more options. Well, then give us more options, because you haven't given us a single option in this bill. Thank you.
The member from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, can I ask you to remove the roll call?
Yes, you can ask me to remove the roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I have to say this. I can't believe that anyone would ever say that a vendor benefits from offering a job to somebody. I cannot believe that you think that way. That is just abhorrent in my world. Every vendor that I talk to, every business owner I work with, when we have these conversations about 14C or any other employment, they work hard to make sure that it fits the person, that they can do what they are enabled to do, their talents, their direction, what needs to happen. And gosh, I hope you guys don't think that. We are going to find somebody who does something wrong, you betcha. But most of those people, their parents or the child themselves or the adult says, gee, I wish I could do something. And that vendor or boss says, well, you know what, Joe? I've got some small jobs. Would you like to help me with them? Do you think you could handle this? And they work it out. Sometimes they have to employ somebody to help them help the new hire, the disabled hire. Like Ann said, some are not verbal. You have to show them. You have to handhold with them to make sure that they understand both what the job is and how to be careful and how to be responsible for what it is. And most of those disabled people are very intent on what they do. And oh, by the way, I think I heard, oh, well, there are other things you can do. I have one handicapped person. Every time a law enforcement shows up, she gets a ride in the car, whether she's working at her job or not. They give her a ride around the block or whatever. And when she sees law enforcement, they all get a hug. In fact, they can't dare walk away until they've gotten a hug. But she also does some cleaning for some businesses. And everybody knows her. It's just, and it is just one example of what happens in my district, and I'm sure it happens in yours too. The other thing to remember, members, is this employers have to end this in August 1st of 2026. The offering is not to hire new employees. So in other words, right off the bat, we're getting rid of jobs for people. And as members have said, we're removing opportunities. So thinking about this, Representative Fisher, I should have come and talked to you earlier about this, but I would really like to have you reconsider, and Madam Chair, I'm asking a question, if he'll listen or hear me.
He will yield.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there something we can work on so that we can offer an option for 14C as opposed to just shutting it off? Is there something we can do?
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Keel. First of all, I will say that I think we can actually get both. We can get people to still have the jobs and to be paid minimum wage. However, I hear your concerns, and I'm hoping to have a continuing discussion to talk about how that would look. I really think we can get to a place that addresses your concerns and make sure everyone's put together a living wage. I know part of it was asking for a plan. Last year in Chair Norris Committee, we put together a plan with the dollars there. But I'm willing to continue that discussion, see what that can look like, particularly when we get to conference and we're talking to the Senate.
Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, thank you, Representative Fisher. I want us to think, though, while that's nice that we can see a minimum wage, I really think we have to think in terms of, we certainly don't want anybody to ever be paid 7 cents for a job. I think we can all agree on that. But certainly minimum wage for some of these jobs is probably over the edge for the employer, even though they would like to and may very well donate or provide other options for the person who they're employing. Not everything is cash. There are a lot of other things that can be done, and often done in rural Minnesota. I'm sure in the cities too. Hey, you know what? I can help you with this, or I can do whatever. Well, when we can have that conversation. But I just thank you that we are talking about this and really reconsidering what it is we're looking at, because I just really think we are taking away opportunity for people that are not ever going to work on a full-time job, but maybe they will work themselves into stability and being able to be more effective in their job and learn skills that they wouldn't have expected. So I don't think we ever want to write things off, but I think we also have to understand that there are people in our world that will always be disabled. They will always need help. They will always need purpose, and we need to provide them with some way, opportunity. And I know our business owners, our vendors, they will also see this need. I know they do. Often there's a lot of opportunity. We just have to connect the dots for people. So that's part of the service. With that, thank you. And oh, by the way, please vote for Amendment 2, green. Oh, we're going to say, we're not going to do the vote anymore. I'm out. It's time to shut up. Thank you.
All those in favor of the Keel Amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed to the Keel Amendment, please say no.
No. Division, Madam Speaker, division.
Division having been called for, all those in favor of the Keel Amendment, please stand. And members, just a reminder, you have to be at your desk to be counted, because it is impossible for our counters to keep track of members who are moving around. So we will pause here for a moment to let folks come in. And then just be aware that you need to be standing at your desk to be counted. All right, those who support the Keel Amendment, be seated. Those who oppose the Keel Amendment, please stand. There being 62 ayes and 66 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franzen moves to amend Senate File Number 4399, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A4.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franzen.
Thank you, Madam Speakers and members. So the A4 amendment, which is before you, protects tax dollars from being given to illegal aliens. The amendment would modify the definition of New American to mean those who were born abroad who have legal status. If you're here illegally, you would not be eligible for these taxpayer dollars. As a reminder, last year the DFL gave $48.43 million to this grant program last year. Did you know that 7 out of 10 Minnesotans say the federal government is not doing enough about the border situation? And yet, time and time again, this body is giving hard-earned tax dollars to those who are here illegally. So at a time when the border crisis is one of the top issues in America, and when sanctuary cities are facing the pressure of the border crisis, we need to do better at ensuring Minnesota does not become a magnet for illegal aliens. Sadly, we know that the Democrats, one of their goals is to turn Minnesota into a sanctuary state. Thankfully, so far, that has not happened, has not passed, has not even had a hearing. But members, this is an issue that Minnesotans are paying attention to. As I said, 7 out of 10 Minnesotans say the federal government is not doing enough about the border situation. 59% of Minnesotans opposed becoming a sanctuary state, and only 34% of Minnesotans supported becoming a sanctuary state. When the DFL proposed we become a sanctuary state or pass laws giving taxpayer-funded health care to illegal aliens, driver's licenses to illegal aliens, and grant funding like the funding found in the New American Grant Program to illegal aliens, the DFL caused Minnesota to become a magnet for illegal aliens. So, Madam Speaker, members, I would like to request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Fisher moves to amend the Franzen amendment to Senate File Number 4399, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A6.
To the author of the amendment to the amendment, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I offer this amendment to make the process work. And the reason I mention that is, first of all, I want to acknowledge we have a lot of outside forces that want to polarize our society, and they've done a great job over time. They want to polarize and they want to demonize a certain selection. The reality is most people who are coming here have a legitimate reason to be here in our country. They have a legal path to be able to come in, but when they first come in, they don't have the documents here so that they can work here to solve our severe workforce crisis that we have in our state that is hurting not just the urban areas, but is having a disproportionate impact in our rural areas. I've had people in rural parts of the state in the long-term care industry reach out to me so often. They have found good workers out there but don't have the documents yet that they can legally work. And what this amendment does, would allow us to use these funds for people who've got a legal pathway here, is to be able to work here legally to help address the severe workforce shortage we have here. In addition, I want to say that there are outside forces that want to polarize us. I want to say that as Minnesotans, we welcome people here who have a path to be able to solve a workforce crisis, to make sure that as we have people in nursing homes, as we have people in long-term care, to be able to make sure that we've got the staffing so that those facilities can take care of those who are in most need. I also want to put a little personal note on this. Is where I go to church, it is not unusual. Most people that I go to church with have not been born in this country. I've had the privilege over the last few years to be able to help learn their language. I'm not a Spanish speaker. They've helped teach me Spanish. They have helped me learn how to sing in Spanish. The biggest honor I have had is when our people who've come to join us here to take the jobs that we have also had me come lead the musical singing in Spanish at our congregation. This is the people that we are talking about serving, the people who've got a right, who can help solve a major problem here, and that's what my amendment does, is it allows us to use those dollars to help those people get the documents they need so that they can work here and help solve our severe workforce shortage. I would ask for a green vote.
Discussion to the amendment. The member for Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Fisher yield?
Representative Fisher will yield. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Fisher, what amount of a $72 billion budget should be allocated for people who are here in Minnesota illegally?
Representative Fisher.
What I would like to say is that everybody is a person that should be treated with dignity and honor. And I will say that that is not always happening with this conversation here. To be able to treat dignity and honor is the most important thing. And I think one of the most important things is so many times people who are undocumented, who have a legitimate reason to be here to solve our workforce shortage, is being carved out and demonized overall as a whole when we're talking about this. And the reason I'm saying that is because so often people are wanting to lump people together as illegal. I don't see anybody as illegal. I see people who are looking for a pathway to be able to be productive to our society, and we should provide them the dollars to be able to be here to help solve our workforce shortage.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When I think about this, I think about probably the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who are trying to come to America because of freedom, because of liberty, because of prosperity that is found here in America, because of our constitutional republic. People who are seeking to come here legally aren't being allowed into our state, aren't being allowed into our country, and now you are trying to say that the people who skipped the line, who came here and broke our laws, that we should hand the money that Minnesotans today, on April 15th, had to pay in, that their money should go for legal services for people who didn't come to this country legally, who broke the law, who broke our laws, our nation of law and order. This is completely outrageous that our state would consider spending Minnesota taxpayer dollars to help people who are here illegally obtain legal status, jumping the line, going ahead of people who are waiting their turn legally to come here to find the prosperity that is found in America. So I'm going to ask a different way. What percentage of the state budget should be spent on people who are here illegally?
Representative Schultz, are you asking Representative Fisher to yield?
I would like to know if Representative Hill would yield to that question.
Representative Hill will not yield to the question.
All right. Would Representative Ream yield to the question?
I see Representative Ream is not on the floor.
Interesting. We've got a hearty debate that we're going to take on this evening. Would Representative Cha yield to a question?
Representative Cha, will you yield to a question? Representative Cha will not yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Berg yield to a question?
Representative Berg will yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Berg, what percentage of Minnesota taxpayer dollars should be spent to support people who are here in the state illegally?
Representative Berg.
Point of order, Madam
Thank
Speaker.
you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Schultz.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order, Representative Long.
Masons 101 debate must be confined to the question before the body. This goes well beyond the scope of the amendment.
Representative Schultz, if you could stick to the scope of the amendment.
I will do exactly that, which is exactly why I'm eager to hear what Representative Berg has to say about how much money the state of Minnesota should be spending to help support illegal immigrants in the state.
Representative Berg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm eager to answer. The interesting thing is about me being a member of this body, I've actually traveled to the countries that these so-called illegals are coming from. I've been to the most dangerous and impoverished cities in Colombia, in Honduras. I've seen firsthand what the families are going through, the violence that they are escaping. I would ask Representative Schultz, when it's his turn to yield, if he's traveled to those countries, had a meal with those families, slept on the floor of wood shacks, been followed by bad actors, signed security waivers to be in those situations. Happily, I have spent time in community. And I also spent a lot
Madam
of
Speaker,
time
point of order.
with the trades.
Madam
and
Speaker, point of order.
seen the jobs that are available for
Madam Speaker,
those new
point of order.
Americans.
Representative Nash, what is your point of order?
Madam Speaker, apparently point of order under Masons 101, you need to confine debate to the topic at hand. Clearly, Representative Berg is not confining her debate to the order at hand.
Members, just a reminder to confine your remarks to the point at hand. I think both members have strayed a little from the point of what is stated as the point of order. So, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy to recenter us tonight. We have a DFL majority in Minnesota that wants to make Minnesota a sanctuary state, and on top of that, has spent our tax dollars in the last year to benefit people who are here in this state illegally. And we are talking about right now, we are talking about an amendment to an amendment related to the eligibility requirements for a grant program to the tune of $7 million going to people in this state illegally. And so I am wholly centered around this amendment, which is exactly why I would like to ask if Representative Purcell would yield.
Representative Purcell will not yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Well, this is certainly a stark day in this chamber where members aren't even willing to engage in the debate. Madam Speaker, the state of Minnesota is projected to have a budget deficit after $10 billion worth of new taxes, and I'm eager to learn who in this chamber thinks that we should be spending more money to benefit people who are here in this state illegally and make Minnesota a sanctuary state. Would Representative Smith yield to a question?
Representative Smith will not yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Frederick yield to a question?
I think Representative Frederick is still thinking. Representative Frederick will not yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Bonner yield to a question?
Representative Bonner will not yield to a question, and I think Representative Schultz, you probably could make your statement without having to ask members to
Madam
yield.
Speaker, I have yet to get the answer to the question. What amount of money is it all right for Minnesotans to pay $10 billion worth of new taxes to benefit people who are here in this state illegally? What is the amount of money? What is the amount of money that you will raise taxes on Minnesotans so that you can hand the money and put the money in the pockets of people who came to this state illegally? What amount of money? Who can answer that question? I'm happy to take the answer from anyone. Would Representative Cleavorn yield?
Representative Cleavorn will not yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Long yield to a question?
Representative Long will yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Long, What amount of money, when we have a budget deficit on the horizon, should be provided for people who are here in Minnesota illegally?
Representative Long.
Representative Schultz, I won't raise a point of order on your question, but I will note that the debate should be confined to the subject before the body, and you are well beyond the subject of the debate. I will raise to a point of order if you continue this line of questioning with other members.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So would Representative Long yield to a question that relates specifically to this amendment to the amendment?
Representative Long will not yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Brand yield to a question?
Representative Brand will not yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so for the Minnesotans at home who are listening, the Democratic Party here in Minnesota has yet to define exactly how much of your money should be handed to people who are here in this state illegally, who broke the law to get here and are now seeking to take the jobs of Minnesotans. All the while, Democrats in this state are pushing forward a path to a sanctuary state for illegal immigration.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Representative Long, state your point of order.
Madam Speaker, Masons 101, debate must be combined to the question before the body. This is not the question before the body. We are debating an amendment. I have raised this point of order twice now, and I would ask that you please remind the member to confine the question to the amendment, which is what we are debating right now.
Members, please confine your remarks to the amendments to the amendment, and if we need, we can have the chief clerk remind us what the amendment to the amendment is.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate our great debate and your excellent job moderating the debate thus far tonight, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it. But let's understand exactly what the amendment to the amendment does. The amendment to the amendment strikes immigration status right from Representative Franson's amendment. So what we're talking about here is eligibility requirements, and we are talking about whether or not people who are here in Minnesota illegally will be using our tax dollars to gain legal access to our state and take the jobs of Minnesotans. That's what we're debating tonight, Madam Speaker. So I would ask, would Representative Ream yield to a question now?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Representative Long, state your point of order.
Masons 121, paragraph 3, persistent repetition. After the attention of the House has been called to a matter, the member should be directed to discontinue the speech by the presiding officer. So far, we have made a point of order twice on Masons 101. Continues to ask the same question of member after member, and so I ask that he be ruled out of order.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
Representative Nash, state your point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, under Masons 101, number 2, Representative Long is rising to persistent irrelevance. Clearly, the conversation is circled around the very concept that he is debating. The majority leader decides to get up, and just because he doesn't want to talk about it and he wants to provide some cover for his vulnerable members, he's trying to rule Representative Schultz out of order. That's persistent irrelevance. Clearly, it's in the confine of the conversation, members. It'll go a lot easier on you if you let Representative Schultz speak his mind. But if you continue to rise to a point of order, that, by definition of Masons 101, number 2, is persistent irrelevance.
Madam Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Representative Creashaw, state your parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, parliamentary inquiry. On the ruling, if we were to have a ruling on the repetition, would we be ruling on the repetition of coming up with irrelevant motions or the repetition of the questions, Madam Speaker?
Representative Creashaw, I'm going to just move forward and allow Representative Schultz to continue to speak. And so Representative Schultz, if you could please continue to refine your, make sure that your remarks pertain to the amendment and to not persistently ask the same questions over and over again, knowing that you will potentially not get that response.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, what we know tonight is after a persistent level of questioning found perfectly within debate here in this chamber around eligibility requirements, for people who came to this state illegally, and how our state policy is currently benefiting people who came here illegally. What we know is that the members of the majority party in Minnesota are placing the needs of illegal immigrants ahead of the needs of taxpayers, ahead of the needs of Minnesota citizens, ahead of the needs of the people who obey the law and support our constitutional republic. And what we have heard tonight is that the DFL majority in Minnesota fails to represent the voices of taxpayers. What we have heard tonight is that the DFL majority in Minnesota would far rather raise taxes by $10 billion to hand the money to people who came here illegally. What we have heard tonight is that there is no motion that could come before this body that would add additional eligibility requirements to ensure that new government programs that were set up this last year, that they would only be set up to support Minnesotans. Instead, the DFL majority has told us tonight that they will continue to raise your taxes. They will continue to bloat government. They will continue to add 36.5% increases in state spending, biennium over biennium, to benefit people who are here illegally. All the while, they push forward an agenda that would bring about a sanctuary state in Minnesota for illegal immigrants, taking away the dollars of tax-paying, hardworking Minnesotans. And in this particular amendment, if the underlying Franson amendment is not adopted as written, the needs of illegal immigrants would come before the needs of Minnesota workers. And that, Madam Speaker, I cannot stand for.
The member for Morrison, Representative Creshaw.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And for a minute there, I felt like the kid in high school where I had actually done my homework and I was in the back of the class saying, pick me, and you never asked me to answer the question, Representative Schultz. So I'll show you how this is done, how you can get some responses. Would Representative Franson yield for a question?
Representative Franson will yield for a question. Representative Creshaw.
Representative Franson, as I look at your amendment and the amendment to the amendment, the question that I have is, how do you do in an industry like this with very sensitive workers and situations, how do you do a background check without documents? Do you have an answer for that?
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Creshaw, you know, I don't know how background checks can be done, and so that's part of the reason why we are offering this amendment, to make sure that those that are seeking employment have legal immigration status. So Representative Creshaw, I'm extremely curious to know how background checks can be done on those who are here illegally and yet seeking quote unquote documentation. Thank you for the question.
Representative Creshaw.
And thank you. And Madam Chair, parliamentary inquiry, how many other members did Representative Schultz not ask, so I know what my latitude is? No, you don't have to answer that. Representative Zalesnikar, would you yield for a question?
Representative Zalesnikar will yield for a question. Representative Creshaw.
Representative Zalesnikar, you have experience in the long-term care facilities. And my serious question to you is the same one that I posed to Representative Franson. How do you do a background check without the proper documentation?
Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. The process is you must have identification to complete criminal background studies and any of the fingerprinting that's required to care for vulnerable adults.
Representative Creshaw.
So, Representative Zalesnikar, thank you for the answer. And so it begs the next question. So, do you hire some? I mean, how do you reduce the liabilities for these families and the risk and put people in there without knowing their backgrounds? How do you remove that risk if there's no way to check for the background or the documentation?
Representative Creashaw, are you asking Representative Zeleznikar?
And I'd like to ask Representative Zeleznikar to yield.
She will yield. Representative Zeleznikar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. The reality is you wouldn't be able to hire. Anybody that has a licensed facility in the state of Minnesota is under federal regulations for the nursing home and state, and assisted livings are under state regulations, which both require legal documentation with very specific forms of what you must provide. And if you don't, you would have an ineligible employee file, and you would be fined by the state of Minnesota or the federal government and found in violation.
Representative Creashaw.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Zeleznikar and Representative Keel, I'm not going to ask you to yield, but just consideration. I remember a number of years back, and Representative Zeleznikar, you probably experienced this, when this body and the majority party were actually putting in mandates and really putting the screws on and thinking there was these terrible things happening in long-term care facilities around abuse, and there's going to be more reporting. And so what I'm hearing from you now is, with that kind of environment in this, there's no way a long-term care facility would want to bring in individuals, illegal immigrants, who do not have the proper background, who cannot verify who they are and their backgrounds. That to me seems just common sense. Would you agree with that, Representative Zeleznikar?
Representative Creashaw, are you asking Representative Zeleznikar to yield?
Madam Chair, you're very good at what you do. Representative Zeleznikar, would you yield to that question?
She will yield. Representative Zeleznikar.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the question, and you absolutely wouldn't be able to hire the person. An individual that doesn't have a documentation path would result in an employer considering them ineligible for an employment at any of the facilities in the state of Minnesota. And that would be the case for disabilities. It would be the case for vulnerable adults in any settings of any age that are licensed by the state or federal government.
Representative Creashaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to that, members, and thank you, Representative Zeleznikar, for your answers. Members, please don't come into rural Minnesota and tell us how you think we should do our jobs. Please do not think you have that. Our care facilities, Representative Zeleznikar has worked in those. I've been in and out of those facilities. We have the most caring individuals. They are looking out for these families, and yet we continue to act like we know better than them. We don't. You are not going to hire individuals that you cannot verify their background, their criminal records, and all of that, and put them in a job of the most vulnerable situations of people that are dealing with some of the most difficult elderly care ailments out there. Don't think for one moment, Representative Fisher, in this amendment, we're going to do all that. I oppose the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the line of questioning.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Just to be clear, that the amendment to my amendment is giving hard-working taxpayers their money, their tax dollars, to those who are here illegally, rewarding them. This is on top of other bills that we have seen in this building, $100 million for a universal basic income, $10 million for a brand new unemployment benefit program. This is on top of health care, college. Members, I'd request a roll call first, but members, I implore you to vote no on the Fisher Amendment. Thank you.
Representative Franson has requested a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Franson. Sorry for going after you. It was my intention to go before. I want to speak to the concept of dignity because that's been raised here tonight, that we're concerned about people's dignity and that it's somehow an affront to their dignity to acknowledge the fact that they acted illegally in violation of our sovereignty, which is another interesting word that gets bandied about quite a bit when it's convenient, but never seemingly when it's advantageous to our own citizens. But we have sovereignty too. And the maintenance of our dignity as American citizens and as residents of the state of Minnesota is rooted in large part in the recognition of that sovereignty. And that's what seems to be forgotten. There's an entire class of Americans who have been forgotten. And, I know that there are certain terms that have, for some reason, and I really do find it bizarre, have become metastasized into triggering folks. Phrases like America first. But what that's really about, and if you talk to the people who proudly espouse that phrase, what they'll tell you is that they have been forgotten, that nobody is working for them. And it's hard to feel dignified when you're being ignored by the people who you elect to represent you. It sends a pretty strong signal that you're not worth very much. And I hear it all the time. Last year, my first year serving here, I took a phone call from one of my constituents, an elderly lady who lives by herself, and I couldn't help her with her problem. She called to complain about her property taxes, the valuation of her home. There's nothing I can do about that as a state legislator, but I listened to her anyway for a solid couple of hours, tell me her entire life story. And the summary of it was, I did what I was told. I followed the rules. I made good decisions. I paid my bills. I kept up my credit. I did all the things that everyone told me you're supposed to do all along the way. And now, in my twilight years, I'm facing the prospect of losing my house to the very government that was constituted to serve me. I've got another one here. This one was sent to me more recently this year. I'll just read a short excerpt from it. Have you even spoken to the average Minnesota citizen? Those of us who are broken beneath rising food costs, decreased donations which keep food shelves operational, rising gas costs. I've been working as a DoorDash delivery driver to bring home some money into our home. With gas prices continuing to rise, I'm unable to do even this. And prior to this, she disclosed that she adopted a child from Nigeria, and she's also taken in her elderly mother to care for her. So she's caring for 2 generations on either side of her as a middle-class individual. She tried to pay off some debt by taking on this extra work. And this is how she closes out. She says, now the final punch in the stomach, which doubled me over with grief, was when we had our 2023 taxes completed. The money that was necessary to pay off the debt so we could survive pushed us into the next tax bracket, and now we owe the state of Minnesota $3,000. Of course, we don't have it, so we borrow it and go right back into debt. Now, we did that to her. I'm using the collective we, the broad we of the state of Minnesota. We did that to this woman. We did that to the elderly lady I talked to last year, who's now looking back on a lifetime of serving her family and working diligently and following the rules, looking at potentially losing her house as a thank you from us. There's not a lot of dignity in that. And so this idea that we have to fork over part of the $3,000 that she now unexpectedly has to pay, that's going to be redistributed to folks who quite literally didn't follow the rules. That's the defining characteristic of their legal status in our country, is that they didn't follow the rules. And what we're saying today, what you're saying today, by voting green on this amendment to the amendment, is that those folks matter more than our folks. That those folks are somehow owed, by breaking our rules, the hard-earned money that was brought home by the folks who did. Go right ahead.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk call the names of the members voting remotely? There is no one voting remotely anymore. The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 yeas and 61 nays, the motion does prevail and the amendment is adopted. Back onto the Franzen Amendment as amended. Representative Franzen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So this Saturday was my endorsement convention, and if any of you know Senator Westrom, he can really give a really great speech, and I just love listening to him. So anyway, he was telling this story about lemmings. So I'm going to share the story, but I'm going to change it up just a bit. Do any of you know what lemmings are? Yes, it's part of a rat family, the little animals, herd mentality. They follow each other. And sometimes those lemmings will follow each other right off a cliff. Members, on that last amendment, you all followed each other right off the cliff. What you said, what you voted for, was that you want Minnesotans to continue paying higher taxes to fund illegal aliens. We have a border crisis out of control. We have President Biden flying illegal aliens into our states. And you are giving them our tax dollars, rewarding them. Members, that is disgusting. In a time when Minnesotans are facing high inflation, expensive groceries, gas prices are extremely high again, people are wondering how to put food on their table, pay their electricity bills, keep a roof over their head, and you're saying, we're going to give some more tax dollars to illegal aliens. Members, that is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. You are all lemmings, just following each other off the cliff, not even able to think for yourself. So it's very disappointing. This amendment would have said those who have legal immigration status can have access to these grant dollars. That's what legal immigration status. Instead, you're like, irrespective, don't care. We don't care about your legal status here. We're just going to give you our tax dollars. It's very disappointing. Madam Speaker, I request to have this amendment withdrawn.
Representative Franzen withdraws the amendment. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 4399 as amended.
Third reading. Discussion. The member from Candy Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, a lot has been said today about this important policy bill that does help a lot of people. I want to give credit again for the members. I think Chair Fisher really did a nice job working across the aisle, allowing people to be involved in helping set the pace and the pattern for doing good things with substance use disorder, for example. One of the things I wanted to bring up here was, one second. The work that we did on paperwork reduction with Representative Frederick, removing some of those barriers that help people in the field of drug and alcohol counseling are doing it better because they don't have to have such rigid rules to follow. We also had some tweaks to the rules where drug alcohol counselors could serve up to 60 patients. We kind of gave them a few more to work with when a seasoned counselor could do that, giving more capacity and helping more people. I want to also recognize the take-home dosage definitions that we kind of tweaked a little bit as well. We're allowing people in recovery using MAT, which is medically assisted therapies, again, I mentioned it earlier, so people can take some of this home with them for longer periods of time so they don't have to go back as often and be sort of tied down to daily visits with some providers that require that. And also something I'm really pretty happy with, because we were all sort of given this unfortunate situation with a company in the state of Minnesota that was having some questions about their billing practices and how we needed to tighten up the guardrails for some of those things. Again, I want to thank Representative Frederick, Chair Fisher, Representative Edelson, and a number of us that were working on tightening those things up so that we made sure the Minnesota tax dollars that were being allocated towards that were hitting the mark, because there was some players out there that were not doing what we had hoped they would be doing. We found it to be important in this situation too, and we heard from a lot of good testifiers, that in this area, part of our rule was we didn't think having an independent contractor act as a peer recovery specialist was maybe in the best interests of our tax dollars, because it was harder for us to kind of manage where that was going, how they were being considered legitimate and with liability that would possibly jeopardize our program's integrity. So Representative Frederick thought that was a pretty good idea. I supported that, so thank you for that as well. So again, there is some good parts about this bill, and I'm very saddened that I can't support the bill because of this important issue we talked about with our 14C, which is our workers that are going to eventually lose the ability to work in the community. Not all of them. Again, we talked about coming up with a better plan. I will stand ready to work with anybody that wants to come up with a better plan, because I think this is going to be a challenge as we move this thing forward. And if we want to do something about it, now is the time to do it. So with that, it's been a long day. We got another bill to go, I think, after this. I thank you for this work, this committee work. Again, let's keep working on this, and I hope we can do better in the future. But right now, I'm having a hard time supporting it because of some poison pills in here. I think we can do better. So, members, thank you for a robust conversation tonight, Madam Chair. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, before this bill heads into conference committee, I just want to make one last plea for 14C and Achieve Services in Blaine. Because if this bill goes through as is, these centers have all told us losing that wage is going to be a serious problem, and it's going to hurt their programs. And I always assume daycare centers are good people. I mean, disability centers are good people. I mean, that profession attracts the best among us to help people who can't help themselves. So I was very surprised to see that some on your side of the aisle think they have sinister motives It was such a weird way to take it. That is one of the last people who help disabled people are not villains. I'm going to make that daring proclamation. So we should be helping them and not taking away their options. And the system is working. And as you say, well, we're down to 3,500 people working these jobs. That means you are going to have a significant number of people lose their job because this bill. It's a reality. That's what will happen if you pass this bill with this in it and it becomes law. We all know that. And I heard it mentioned that this should be a bipartisan issue. And it is. It is a bipartisan issue. This bill passed in the Senate with 58 votes. 58 votes. Massive bipartisan vote. Because at least Senate Democrats and Republicans agree that this is an important program that genuinely helps disabled people. But taking away their jobs, that doesn't help them. Doesn't help them at all. It's ridiculous that this is even in the bill because it's partisan, but it's not partisan because Republicans don't like nonprofits or something. It's because you have this weird thing against nonprofits, which I am so shocked to hear, that somehow disability centers are bad actors. I'm sure there's a few, but the ones employing these people are doing this state a service. They're doing the disabled people a service. It's a program that should continue, and ending it makes absolutely no sense. So when this goes into conference, know that this bill could have left this floor with a real bipartisan vote. It left the Senate floor with 58 votes. But because of this partisan provision, I have a hard time believing you're going to find a single bipartisan vote because this is terrible. And a vote for this bill will eliminate for certain, there is an absolute certainty that this will take away people's jobs. And I can't do that, not to our disability providers who have helped so many people, particularly Achieve Services in Blaine. They've advocated that this is going to be a problem for them. And I, for one, am going to listen to the disability centers of my district because they are the experts. And I don't know how it came up, but they're definitely not villains. And we should all be very grateful for the services they are producing. So members, please vote against this bill. And Representative Fisher, please let this portion die in conference committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will Representative Fisher yield to a question?
Representative Fisher will yield for a question. Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Fisher, I have a couple of questions. Number one, I'm going to start in Article 6 under the DCT part of your bill. And let me just, Representative Baker, mentioned there's a bunch of good things in this bill. So thanks for working so hard on it. My question, Representative Fisher, has to do with you changed some nomenclature from secure treatment facility to state-operated treatment programs, and then expanded what those are. Previously, the secure treatment facilities were really reserved for people who had lost their civil rights. And especially when this article has to do with, bloodborne pathogens. And so I'm curious as to, number one, I think my first question is how were employees that were in a community-based service under the executive board's control, how would they have dealt with bloodborne pathogens previous to this bill, previous to the language that you added in this bill?
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Nadeau. From my understanding is the reason we went with this language here is because not all employees were covered before, and now we will make sure that they all will be.
Representative Nadeau.
And thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Fisher. Will Representative Fisher yield for another question?
He will yield for another question. Representative Nadeau.
Thank you. And my question is specifically due to the population that these employees are serving. So the secure treatment facilities were specifically dealt with people who had lost their civil rights. This is expanding into crisis centers, residential facilities, outpatient services. So my question is that expansion is pretty significant, and I'm just wondering, I understand that you want to extend this to all employees, but if we're going to do that, then what about detention employees? What about front-facing employees in shelters? I just can't get my head around why this is being expanded. And that'll be my last question for this article, Madam Speaker.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Nadeau. Direct care and treatment covers many different facilities throughout the state. And as a result, this is making sure that it's getting to cover all the facilities at the different levels.
Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That didn't quite answer it for me, but maybe I'll check with you after. My next question, if Representative Fisher will yield to one more question, Madam Speaker.
Representative Fisher, will you yield for one more question? He will yield. Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the first article, this is talking about employees in 245D. On line 8.31, it says staff under 18, the existing language literally prohibited staff under 18 years of age to performing overnight duties or administering medication. Your bill strikes administering medication. I'm not saying that this would allow staff under 18 years of age to administer medication, but I'm curious as to your thoughts why you struck that from this language, and what types of medication will staff under 18 years of age be able to administer in 245D licensed facilities?
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Nadeau. This is something that we did have discussion on in our committee on. This was being established because we've got the workforce shortage that we have out there. And in terms of the 18-year-olds that are doing these duties that would be able to administer, they'd be following the rules that were already established in protocol that folks over the age of 18 would be able to follow in administering medications.
Representative Nadeau.
And thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Fisher. I think it's a little bit risky. I think it's a little bit risky, and I remember the conversations we had in committee, and I think there were some questions that were asked on the specifics of it, and we don't really know, and that I'm concerned with that. And I can't not address Article 3 in this bill as well. There's been a lot of debate tonight on this particular provision. And for some of you that don't know, I spend a lot of time in my day job working with disability services. I've got providers that are both center-based employers, and I've got providers who are community-based employers. And the one thing that I know, regardless of what passes, regardless of what comes out of a conference committee on this bill, the resiliency of these providers, the resiliency of the people they serve, they're going to be okay, and because of who they are. This is a difficult conversation and debate to have. On one side, we don't want people to lose the option of that person-centered care. And I think the long-term effect, or the longer-term effect we're going to have here is, as we have moved, and we've heard testimony today and about the number of people that are in center-based employment, and it's declining. And we're moving away, and it's because of the re-envision work that we've done for these for people with disabilities. And in the long term, our costs are going to increase because of the need. And that's important. I think it's important to know. I think I've also learned tonight that there's a huge difference between disability services that are provided in the Metro and disability services provided in Greater Minnesota. And I'm not convinced that one size fits all. But I think we need to make sure that we try to keep as many options open for people as possible. I appreciate the phase out of this. I'm not sure it's long enough. I think there's a number of people in this community that it's gonna take an enormous amount of work to find community-based employment. Because and that's what we're interested in doing, is making sure that people are able to do the work that they want for as long as they want. And there are other options for people that don't want to. Day services provides, all kinds of opportunities for this population. And if we go to conference and having a longer phase-in might be helpful. If there's other options that we can look at, and I appreciate Representative Knorr last year and Senator Hoffman by putting money into and allowing providers to apply for dollars that will help fill that gap, and hopefully they do, and hopefully DHS and everybody else is making sure that they're making those dollars available. But I guess my final statement is, if it does, and I know it's going to be a difficult poll in the Senate, but maybe increasing the time would be an important component. Thank you, Madam Chair.
To the member from Blue Earth, Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. I want to give a shout out to Chair Fisher for this really, really good bill. I also want to give a really big thank you to our CA. I think everybody knows that committees would fall apart without the staff on the committees, and Nick is phenomenal. This bill, I'm going to talk about some of the substance use disorder provisions within the bill. We already talked about with Representative Baker's amendment on sober homes, but I want to talk a little bit more about that. We've already in the past said that sober homes have to have an opiate antagonist like Narcan in them, but we heard from community that while it might be in the house, nobody knew where it was. So this bill says it has to be in somewhere just as obvious as something like a fire extinguisher. Everyone should know where the Narcan is. It's that basic. The other thing is that, as we talked about, is that we should allow medications. We should follow some of those national best practices, and that's what this bill does. And I want to thank Representative Baker for his continued work on this. I think every single meeting that we had, the two of us and Representative Edelson, when she was available, we were doing this together. Another really important aspect of this bill, and again, this is where every single meeting that we had was done, both Representative Baker and I were at every one of these. We were meeting with recovery community organizations and RCOs across the state. Their whole purpose is to support people in recovery. And what that looks like in some cases is when people are straight out of treatment or straight out of the criminal justice system, they can have what's called a recovery peer. And that peer is there to walk alongside them to help them be successful, can help navigate them to resources, is to support them in whatever they think is best. And what we found and what we heard, what Representative Baker and I were hearing from some recovery peers, is that they were being encouraged to do things that they didn't feel was quite right. They were being told to bill Medicaid for things that they didn't do. And in this bill, one of the things that we do is we ban independent contractors from being, or recovery peers from being independent contractors. Because what we found out through the course of some of the questions that we were asking is that these peers who were raising questions about these unethical practices that they were being asked to do, that because they're an independent contractor, there was a lack of accountability that could be placed upon the company that they were working with, I guess, in that case. So we came together, we talked about what do we think is the best course to tackle some of this fraud or potential fraud. And this is one of the solutions that we came forward on that. So I just want to say this was a team effort. This is bipartisan. It was collaborative. And thank you, everyone. And I hope for a green vote. Thank you.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson. The member from Washington, Representative Anderson. Member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley. All right, well then we will go to Representative from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will take the opportunity to talk. I like talking. So, thank you very much for working as a team. Human Services has been an interesting foray into life, and as most of you members know, there's a lot of subject matter all the time that we're talking about that affects a lot of lives and all kinds of people that we talk to. Young, old, disabled, handicapped. I've worked in my career a lot with a young lady named Mickey. Mickey, I've watched grow up. She was 18 when she had a car accident and became disabled. Unfortunately, this week, Mickey had a cardiac arrest and is no longer with us. She is a diehard Republican, members, so she's at every parade she can possibly be at, she and her dogs and her husband. She is been on all kinds of committees for the governors and been very active in personal care attendant. She and her mother and brother, they've got a personal care attendant business. I don't know what's going to happen there. But she had a can-do attitude and worked very hard for whatever she needed to do next, whether it was a reward and she got paid or it wasn't. She did a lot of volunteering. And, you know, I really appreciate the relationship that we enjoyed and watching her grow up. I'm very sad for her family, but I know that she's now enjoying the ability to not have a wheelchair anymore and is strong again. So, in this bill, as we've talked about at length, I really appreciate that Representative Fisher gave me this bill for a senior linkage line. I actually experienced it. So when you decide to put your family in the nursing home or the assisted living, I think a lot of people think that you just walk in and say, hey, I need a room for mom or dad or whatever. But that's not quite how it works. And even after I talked my parents into living in assisted living, we're busy trying to figure out all the logistics of how this is going to work. And we were signing papers, and I was explaining to my parents what it was they needed to do. And this is the bill in Article 4 that says that we're no longer going to reach for a senior linkage line identifier because we had to have a number before they could sign up. But we were supposed to have done that weeks before we moved into assisted living, but we were doing it while the furniture was getting moved in at the same time. And so the Minnesota Aging came to me and said, you know, this just isn't the Board of Aging. This isn't working like it should. And certainly by the time we actually go to figure out what a family needs, the number is kind of mute at that point. Just don't need it, because you don't just put somebody in a facility. You have to have a conversation about, do they qualify? Is this what they need? And you've had a lot of conversations by the time you're actually bringing the jammies with. And it's quite an experience if you've ever done it, and I suggest if your families do that type of thing, you should get involved. It's very emotional, but it's also quite an education. So I really appreciate the the aging services part of the bill, and thank Representative Fisher for giving me that. I do have some concerns about what we're doing with nursing homes, and I'm very concerned about the assumption in this bill, or maybe not the assumption, but the idea that nursing homes are buying places from out of state and not having more money than they actually are addressing nursing homes. I can tell you for a fact, I have not seen that at all. What I've seen is nursing homes saying, sorry, we just can't provide services anymore. Yeah, it is sometimes employment, but our nursing homes are really struggling yet. And even though we did some help last year, we're going to be back at it next year. There is some conversation about it, and maybe I'll even come back and ask you for something, because I'll still be active in, well, I assume my parents will still be living, but I'll still be active in CURE. So this bill has got, like members have said, there are some good things in this bill, but there are some very troubling things, such as the removing the economic funding for people with disabilities. We're not giving them the choice. I hope, Representative Fisher, that we are able to talk about this a little bit further as it goes to conference committee, I would guess, and have that conversation about how we can work something different out, or a conversation about what would work best for our disabled people that cannot do a full minimum wage job, or just a full job in general. We want to be able to support them. We don't want to push them off the cliff. That would be really sad, and we want to provide for disabilities. And as I believe Representative New Brindley said, we are always going to have disabled with us. You know, I'd like to be able to work out of that, but the reality is that there's always going to be somebody with that kind of need and direction and support. And you know, it's all great when you have a family, but some people don't have family, or mom and dad passed away and there is nobody to help them. And that's really sad when you see that they don't have the supports they need. So we need to make sure we take care of them. So I thank our staff for all the hard work they did, the members, and but with that, having talked about this bill for a while, I'm sorry, but I'm not a yes vote either. I'm just really wish we could have worked out some of these details and have passed a more bipartisan bill. But I thank you very much. Thank you, members, and I guess we're close to voting.
To the author of the bill, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chamber, for the opportunity to present the Human Services Policy Bill tonight. I'd like to also make sure to thank a number of folks. I'd first of all like to thank the nonpartisan staff. Without them, we would not have had this bill today. Ms. Danielle Punelli, Mr. Doug Berg, who made sure that there was no cost in this bill. That took a little bit of work. The revisers, folks from the revisor's office who helped make sure that everything was fine, Dean Trefitz and Alex Willie. The staff that we had out there, my committee legislative assistant, Spencer Kroos, GOP research, Jonathan Cotter, great help as we were getting things moved back and forth. Our DFL researcher, Molly Pedersen, my committee administrator, Nick Stuma-Langer, our committee pages, Florence and Lydia, and the entire committee. This was a committee that we worked very much in a bipartisan way. I want to specifically call out Representative Keel for helping carry parts of this bill, and the awesome bipartisan work that was being done with Representative Baker, Representative Frederick, Representative Edelson. You know, this is a lot of good stuff. I will say that I will make promises that we'll continue working on 14C. I think that we had a very good discussion on it. And I want to say that it was referenced that, you know, the Senate
pass it off. And I think as a chamber, we can all agree we can come up with a better bill than what the Senate had on it, because I think all of us pretty much agree that while the Senate may think 7 cents an hour is okay, I think as a chamber I was hearing that's not right, and we've got to do more work on this. I'm open and will commit to that. We'll continue to work on this. And I think this will be something that may look different as it comes back. I'm looking forward to that continued conversation. I think it's really important that as we're addressing this, while we have 2028, it's 4 years away, I'm open to other thoughts how to approach it. I appreciate those being put out. And one of the things I also want to keep in mind in the discussion that I kind of missed earlier is that part of our disabled community are coming from communities of color or low-income communities. And some of the folks working that don't always have the family with the resources that we do in our communities. And that's also a group I want to make sure that we don't leave out, to make sure that this is part of the reason why we want to make sure that we're raising the minimum wage for those folks. And with that, I want to thank everybody for their support and ask for a green vote.
The clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk call the name of the member voting remotely?
Keeler.
Votes aye.
Keeler.
Say it again.
Keeler votes aye.
Keeler votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 yeas and 62 nays, the bill is passed as amended and it's titled agreed to.